just introduce you all.
Oh, just an introduction.
You ready yet?
We're ready for recording, but
Huh? Done? Thank you very much. Good afternoon to every one of you. I'd like first of all to thank members of the media. We've deliberately invited today both editors and reporters, journalists, and call-in show hosts where available. Over the course of the last few weeks, as you know, we've been going through a very lengthy process of consultation and sharing with persons. Back in July, we met with the social partnership and started a consultative process towards the beginning of phases 2 and 3 of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. After meeting the social partnership within our own parliamentary party, we had a similar consultation. And then, of course, we went to the public of Barbados for Barbadians to have their say as to those institutions that they believe to be essential, highly desirable, optional delivered, better delivered elsewhere. And in fact, the responses to that were phenomenal. We had, I believe, almost 5,000 people respond to some 93 questions, which on average took about 47 minutes. That is an amazing response from the people of this country. Since then, we've collated the responses of everyone, and we were then able to start the second tier of consultations, which started with the social partnership yet again, members of cabinet, members of the permanent secretaries committee. Today we want to meet with members of the media, and through you, we could think of no better persons to help us reach the public of Barbados than yourselves. And I really am going to leave you because I have to go back to chair cabinet. But I have absolute and utter confidence in my economic team, who I'd like to introduce at this stage and who have been carrying the heavy lifting. Ambassador Clyde Maskell, as you know, has been the lead negotiator with the International Monetary Fund and has been playing a critical role in anchoring for us that responsibility. But it is not a one-man team. He is ably assisted by Professor Avinash Prasad, who, as you know, is one of our special advisors. And the government of Barbados made a request of the International Monetary Fund for us to have seconded back to Barbados, or released rather, not seconded, back to Barbados for a period of 2 years for the purpose of both negotiating this program and also helping us with meeting and doing the transformation that is necessary for us to meet what we have to do in the next 2 years. Dr. Kevin Greenwich, who has been at the International Monetary Fund for some 7 years and has had extensive work being part of teams that have gone to other countries, I think Zambia and Chad, and then part of a division of the IMF that in fact reviews programs on a consistent basis across many countries. And then of course the governor of the central bank and myself, we kind of stay outside of the team, but that we are here to be able to assist and to give policy direction, and in his case to continue to assist with respect to the banking sector and monetary stability of the country. And then, of course, the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs, Mr. Ian Carrington, who is behind, who is government's chief technocrat with respect to finance and economic affairs in the public service. The team is, in fact, much wider, but as you can see, these are very nice surroundings. The government of Barbados does not have a lot of large spaces, and therefore we've tried to keep it tight today in order to be able to accommodate as many of you as possible. I will ask Ambassador Maskell to address you first, and he will then invite Dr. Greenwich to do a presentation. And this is the same presentation that has been shared across all of the different sectors. And thereafter, after he speaks, both Professor Prasad and the Governor of the Central Bank and the Director of Finance are available to say anything that they want to, but then invite questions from yourselves with respect to anything that has been presented here this evening. I have to go back to Cabinet, but as you can see, these matters are of sufficient urgency that we cannot allow time to pass, and we need to be able to continue the process of economic democracy by extending consultation as far as possible. Some people seem to feel it's a little too much. I don't. And our consideration of all who have been successful is that if we pull together and we do the heavy lifting together as a people, then I have every confidence that Barbados will come out of this stronger than we were, and above all else, fit for purpose, fiscally fit and fit for purpose. Because if we're not fit, then we can't make the long distances and the difficult rides and travails that will face us in the future. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Ambassador Maskell to take over, and may I wish all of you a very pleasant evening after you leave here. Thank you, and walk good. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I live by the adage that success is a journey, not a destination. And it is instructive that Prime Minister Motley should speak about the journey that we are on. And as we know, journeys are fraught with difficulty. But truth be told, we have a very united team, economic team, very able united team that has worked assiduously over the last couple of weeks, in fact months, to get us to this stage. But I have to say this, that this journey can be attributed, so far the success can be attributed to the leadership of the Prime Minister, who has chosen very wisely, from Professor Prasad to the very able Dr. Greenwich, who will speak very shortly, my colleague and friend for a long time, the Governor of the Central Bank and the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs. This journey, however, we stumbled over the last 10 years, and there was a lack of leadership. And in so doing, the country reached a stage where our economic fortunes became sustainable in relation to growth, in relation to debt, in relation to our foreign reserves, in relation to the printing of money at the central bank. In every regard, we had 10 years of it. I therefore now invite Dr. Greenwich to give you a perspective of the approach of the government of Barbados by identifying the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, and also outlining the way forward, something that he would refer to call RE. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Clyde. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And as Ambassador Clyde pointed out, my role here is quite simple. And in my capacity as Senior Technical Advisor to the Government of Barbados, I'm charged with presenting the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. And I will try to do that as clearly and as succinctly as possible. Much of the presentation is on the screen above, so I begin. So this Economic Recovery and Transformation Program was designed, conceptualized, and in fact is being implemented by the Barbados government and by Barbados as a whole. It's a homegrown program, brought out of the elements of what makes Barbados Barbados. And to understand how the program hangs together, it is necessary to look at how we got here and the elements of, or what you diagnose as the problems that we currently have, and then that will tell you how we get out of that. So in that vein, let me begin. So these charts up here, which I will point to, the first on the left, explains one part of the element of our recovery that is needed: economic growth. In 1991-92, Barbados entered a program with the International Monetary Fund. There was considerable restructure of the economy. And over that period, this chart plots the growth rate. Barbados grew for 14 years between 1991 and 2007, 2007 being the year before the start of the global financial crisis. And we grew at an average rate of 2.5% per year for 14 years, except in 1 year, and that was in 2001 when you had 9/11. And of course, Barbados being a tourism-dependent economy would have been impacted, and we had a decline in growth. But we averaged 2.5% of growth up to 2007. Then along came the crisis, and of course, our growth collapsed. And since then, we have averaged growth actually negative, half percentage point negative growth between 2007 and 2017. Now, to put that in context, what it really means, the chart on the right is like the size of the cake, the economic cake that we all have to share in. In 1993, the cake was $4.1 billion for everyone to share in. By 2007, reflecting the continuous growth, the cake more than doubled to 9.5 billion. Then, and in fact, on average, didn't grow very much. The cake only increased margin 9.5 to 9.9. So the 10 years, the cake has not really grown in terms of the wealth and what is shared among, we have to share among ourselves. So we can see one element of the diagnosis, if we were a medical profession diagnose a problem, will be the absence of growth. So that's one element. And let's continue with the story. The next chart we see here on the left, one tells you what's happening on the fiscal, because the driver of, as I talked, the debt, and also what happens to growth is also reflecting the fiscal position in government finances. I tried to split it between the same period, 1993 to 2007, and there's two concepts in terms of understanding fiscal position. One is overall balance, and one is the primary balance. Not to get technical, the difference between the two are interest payments. The bottom line is the overall, the top is the primary. Why separate like that? Because the interest payments that you have to make today has nothing to do with today's operations, but in the past operations, right? The debt you've taken on. So you tend to look at the primary balance for all intents and purposes. But you can see we average primary balance, which is the summary of our operations, revenues, and expenditures, etc. Between 1993 and 2007, 1.5%. So you're running positive average balance from 1993 to 2007, and you could see that's what facilitated the growth. But after the crisis, you could see the second half between 2007, 2008, and 2017, our primary balances were in deficits, averaging 1%. And if you look at the overall, in the same manner, we've averaged 2% deficit over the period, which is a modest deficit for a country who is developing and still need to borrow and invest, etc. 2% between 1993 and 2007, and then between 2008 and now, 7%. So you can see we did not recover very much in terms of our fiscal position since we hit with the crisis. One analysis suggests the response to the crisis was probably not appropriate, and then after that we had considerable fiscal slippage. So the problem is that as the economy continues to slip, and if we have worsening fiscal position, it puts a drag on the economy, and you can see that reflects what's happening in the economy. But in addition to that, we all know that if we have our personal finances, and we have our incomes, and we have our expenditures, and if your expenditure exceeds your income, you do what? You accumulate debt, right? You got to borrow to finance that. Same with the country, and then you can see the picture there. Because since 2007, we've been running primarily fiscal deficits, both primary and overall. Someone has to pay for that, so we've been borrowing. We've been borrowing from the domestic financial system. We've borrowed from the NIS. We've borrowed externally. It's just a bit unsustainable. And our deficit, our overall debt to GDP ratio, and why do we use debt to GDP ratio? It gives an anchor in terms of standardizing. So if I put it in terms of individuals, a person with a salary, say, 2,000, and they have a debt of 10,000, that's a high ratio. But that same 1,000 for a person earning 200,000 is manageable. So we always classify in terms of debt, so you get a notion. So country, the income is the GDP. So we anchor in terms of that. So in 2007, our debt to GDP ratio was around in region of 75%, quite manageable. And then it continued to rise the way it is today to close to 75%. And that reflects the fact they continue to have to borrow to sustain the position that keeps worsening over time, right? So probably what's the underlying problems? Absence of growth, continue to maintain a fiscal position that is not sustainable. As you continue, what I mean by not sustainable, but if we go to work and you know your expenses every day outstrip your income, then you can only survive for so long. Your position is not sustainable. Likewise, the country is the same. Someone has to finance it, but you can maintain that position as an individual as long as someone, a bank, a grandfather, someone is giving you that financing. Yet we know on the line it's not sustainable, same with the fiscal position. And so what that means is that this chart here points to reserve position. Because the fiscal position isn't sustainable and we try to maintain an unsustainable position, and we're not growing, we're not earning, the money we're being spent and the financing that goes to maintain that fiscal position eventually erodes your reserves. Because you're not earning, but you're spending, right? Make sense? You're not earning, you're spending, so it's coming back around and erode your reserves. So whether the financing is coming from the commercial bank or the central bank, and in the latter case of this, most of it came from the central bank, as the commercial banks avoid taking any more debt. But the analysis suggests, in terms of technical analysis, that for every dollar that you lend to government, 75 cents go back in terms of reserves impact. Why is that so? Almost everything we consume, we import. Almost if I ask for a survey in this room, almost everything that you have in this room was imported. So when you lend government a dollar, or they borrow from the central bank or the financial system, and they pay wages and salaries and might even buy some stationery, they're all imported. And how do you do imports? You exchange that dollar at the central bank for 50 cents. So the reserves fall, right? That's the connection that you're not earning. And then investors are watching and saying, well, this is not sustainable, so they're not bringing any more money. So it becomes almost a self-fulfilling cycle, a virtuous cycle. You could see from 2009, we had reserves in terms of US close to 850 or 1.6 billion. Or we like to standardize in terms of how much weeks of imports you can cover, almost 25 weeks. And that gradually declined sharply over time to where we had at the end of 2017, 420 million, or just about 5 weeks of imports. I like to say 2 toilet papers and a tin sardine and we broke. In other words, this is not a sufficient cover in terms of reserve adequacy to go anywhere. So you see the picture. So if I had to ask anyone, you don't have to be no star in economics, how do you fix this? Well, people will say, well, we got to get growth. You'll be absolutely correct, right? You got to fix the fiscal position because that's unsustainable. True? And you got to build back your reserves. Agree? And then the other element we mentioned here was the debt. People are looking at debt and say, well, this debt is unsustainable. Any individual that have a debt to his income ratio of 175% has serious issues. So you see the 4 pieces we have. So that's how we built the government of Barbados and the economic team built the Barbados Recovery and Transformation Program. The first anchor is to recover. That means immediately tasks, immediate measures to do so. And the latter part is to transform the economy. It's like a patient go to the doctor. You first must recover. You take some pills. You don't walk out feeling healthy and bumpy immediately. And then, depending on the problem, the doctor might tell you, change your lifestyle, go on a treadmill, run, get fit. And this is what we're trying to do. So let me take you into some elements of the program. What's the overall strategy of the program? To generate sustainable and inclusive growth. Growth that not only ourselves, but our generation, our kids and their kids and our great-grandchildren to come can enjoy. We need to restore the kind of growth we saw in the pre-2007, pre-global financial crisis period. And that means that we have to restore debt and fiscal sustainability. We have to bring the debt down to a manageable level, and we have to restore our fiscal position. As the Prime Minister will say all the time, we have to become fiscally fit for the 21st century on our public finances. And how do we do that? What are the key elements? We're going to focus on an ambitious fiscal consolidation strategy. Ambitious because, as I will show in the next slide, I mentioned the primary balance is what we anchor on. I will show that what we're trying to improve in terms of primary balance is a considerable effort. It's ambitious because it requires every Barbadian, it requires significant commitment. But it's doable because we see that the Prime Minister, the leader of the country, is totally committed to attaining these adjustment and transforming Barbados. It requires a comprehensive debt restructuring. Community analysis is very clear that you got to deal with that, and that's why the government announced a comprehensive debt restructuring and is now engaging with the creditors to achieve that. And it's no different if you have a debt with a commercial bank and somehow it get almost sustainable. They call you and have a conversation. Same thing. We got to get growth reforms, remove the impediments to doing business, make sure that we can get projects back, get confidence going. Any impediment to generating growth needed, we got to deal with that. And it's quite easy to see some of them because the international community is in countries. And if you go on the OECD website in trade facilitation, they'll point out impediments to growth in terms of Barbados. And we will deal with those. We got to obviously build back those reserves to comfortable levels. And we know we live in an area becoming increasingly prone to natural disasters. We are probably one of the most stricken areas in terms of natural disasters. Only the other day we had an earthquake, and that's the second that I know that I can remember of, and this was back then. And we got to regain our access to capital markets. What I didn't mention in the previous analysis when I diagnosed the problem is that we've lost complete access to international market. No one's going to lend Barbados at where it is. Our credit worthiness has declined with a stream of downgradings. And this is what investors watch when they plan to invest. We got to rebase that. And then we got to transform the economy into an economy for the 21st century, not by investing in knowledge-based, creative, high-value service and industries. That said, we are visual, so I try to encapsulate it in the adjustment effort in a graph. Now, we know a budget was announced. The mini budget, we affectionately refer to it, which incorporated a number of tax measures aimed at trying to halt and stabilize the economy, broaden the tax effort, widen the net in terms of allowing our international visitors to participate. That effort alone was put us, and what I mentioned here, by the way, when we try to think about what holds this together, is stable debt stability and fiscal stability. So we're looking to anchor our debt to GDP ratio at 60% by the medium term. We put a target at 2030 to 2033. That solid black line is the debt target. But you see, if we just go on the mini budget measures, we'll be way off. We cannot hit it on our own. So what the government has done then is to look, what other fiscal efforts can I put in place, both on the expenditure side, to ensure that I hit that target of debt to GDP ratio of 60% by 2030-33, which will generate confidence in the international community and allow us to move ahead with our economic recovery program. And that is the right line. It brings us very close. But that is not enough. We can't get there unless everybody participates. And the other part missing will be the debt restructuring. So the third line incorporates the debt restructuring, assuming that we are able to restructure our debt and we get considerable savings. What do I mean by that, by the way? Why is that such a stranglehold? Because when you have a high debt to GDP ratio, you must service that debt. So in the fiscal accounts, you have to pay interest, particularly interest payments, and you got to pay a principal. It means that the more debt you have, the less fiscal space or money remaining to do very critical stuff. And then the result is that you will find that the infrastructure deteriorates, roads will deteriorate, building will deteriorate because you don't have the resources available to maintain it. Again, like an individual, when you get your paycheck, you have to go and give the bank, then you have nothing to do, no resource to do anything else. It's the same picture. So by restructuring our debt, we will get some space on the fiscal that we can do valuable capital infrastructure, building back our roads and building back buildings and creating an environment that will encourage growth, encourage private individuals to come and get the growth going. So you see how it hangs together. So that's what. So now, not to get too much into the elements of the adjustment on the fiscal side. Between now and, this is a medium-term growth, but in terms of recovery, this is a medium-term growth path. But in terms of recovery, we want to be able to do a considerable amount within 18 months. Okay? Now, we're going to try to, on the revenue side, our increase in revenue intake because the widening tax base and spreading burden will give us about 1.3% over the 18 months adjustment on that. That will help. That's income. On the expenditure side, we're looking to cut 7.1% of GDP. Remember again, I told you I'm measuring in terms of GDP. So you can see we're doing more on the expenditure side than on the revenue side. And how are we doing that on the expenditure side? Well, we're hoping out of that 7.1%, 5 percentage points will come from debt restructuring because the debt is quite high. And then another 2.1 percentage point will come from non-debt restructuring efforts on expenditure, which basically will be either between wages and the size and structure of government. Now, how we want to get that 2.1 is by analyzing in very detail the structure of the public sector to see how we can make it more efficient and make it more fit for purpose. Because the way it's structured now, we're a considerable, and if I didn't show that, but if you look at the amount of transfers that go to the state-owned enterprises, that has grown almost double over the last 10 to 15 years, where a considerable amount of resources are transferred to the public enterprises for wage and salaries and to service debt in particular. But you have now to look and see, well, how can I restructure this? Not necessarily looking to cut numbers, but looking to make it more efficient and more fit for purpose where we're going. So we expect to get 2.1 percentage point from that effort included. You will see we're boosting capital expenditure from 1.5 the government to 2.5%. Because there's necessary infrastructure, the capital expenditure too low to build back the economy we need. So we need to start to build back that. But we're going to make it only in terms of what is needed, critical priority projects at the moment. I omit to mention one thing. In the last fiscal year, 2017-18, the overall outcome, the primary balance from all the fiscal operations was about 3.3% of GDP, the primary balance, right? But if we're really serious about what we're going to do, we know that 3.3 is not really the true cost of running the government, because arrears amounting. There's a considerable amount of arrears. You will hear the Prime Minister talk about that. Arrears now standing at the size of $1.9 billion. So the true cost, if you had actually paid all your bills, you would not have achieved a primary deficit of 3.3. So before the government could come up with a adjustment, how we adjust, they determine what was the true cost. We had a practice where SOEs would come and you put something in estimate, and then during the year you will go for a subvention. So put all of that together and say, well, let's put everything in the beginning. What will be the true cost? And indeed, the true cost for running government in 2018 will have been in 18-19, this fiscal year, we arrive at a primary balance of 2.3% of GDP. That coincides with the line that I told you in the previous chart. This line, the blue line. Not enough to get. Trying to do is saying, given that this is a true cost, we're going to between now and the end of the fiscal year 18-19 to improve our finances by 1% of GDP from 2.3 to 3.3, and I mentioned how that, and then by the next fiscal year to 6% of GDP. That is a 3.7% increase in the primary deficit. And in terms of adjustment across countries, is ambitious, is the upper end of adjustment. So it's a considerable effort and requires significant commitment. In terms of policies on the revenue side, because many of them were announced before, were announced in the mini budget, including first of all, the removing the NSRL, which by all intents and purposes and by international standard, quite distortionary, and that removal of that, but that's compensated by other taxes. New taxes include the airline and travel and tourism development fee. You have tax on widening the income bracket to the top above $75,000, you get extra. So these measures are already spelled out in the budgetary statement. So in interest of time, I won't go through them, but what is listed here, the gains from them. So on the revenue side, much of that has been implemented. Where the effort now comes from is on the expenditure side. And what is needed here is for us, and we are setting our internal targets. The internal target is to reduce transfers and subsidies over the period by about 115 million. But I must stress, it is not about a number. It is about making the SOEs and the public sector fit for purpose, making it fiscally fit. Fiscal being the fiscal accounts. So if it was just about a number, well, we can just let a number, we can cut, but that's not it. When you go to efficiency, and I will show you later, you may lose some here, gain some here, because you need more here, and like key areas like aviation, etc. But you may lose some in another area, it's not so where you don't need for the 21st century. But hopefully, net position is an improvement and a savings. We're hoping to save 115 million. Probably this is a fiscal year saving about 41 million in the first 18-19, and another 75 million in the following year. I will go through how we get that. Now, the way we're approaching, and the government has chosen to approach the adjustment on the expenditure side through the SOEs, is what the overall board overarching concept is through an effort of retooling and empowering, retraining, and enfranchising. And I'll explain what I mean that. But we coined that, and when it was discussed at the social partnership level in subgroups, they referred to it as the RE program. And perhaps someone should write a jingle about it. But what's the overarching tenements? We'll try to reduce transfers where possible by enfranchisement. For example, one could think of the bus a transport system where in many countries the private sector own that and is regulated by government. So why it could be a program where you allow a driver and a conductor, some person buy a bus, take the bus off of you, they'll probably run it much more efficient than you can, and you provide the regulatory framework to cover the bus routes, for example. So wherever possible, transferring the services maybe to the workers, etc., letting them purchase it so you can get enfranchised and gain from that. Efficiency gains. There are some areas where 1 or 2 or 3 SOEs are doing exactly the same thing. And by bringing them together and merging them, you get immediately savings and efficiency gains. I'll show you what that looks like. Cost recovery. I always mention that I'm 25 years old, going on 20, and I can't remember the last time that I had a bus fare increase, for example. So one way to look at it is say, what is the we can do on the user fees end in an affordable manner, where you can make it by cost recovery. And that's another tenet we look at. And again, are there commercial services that are being provided by the public sector that can be shifted to the private sector? The private sector absorb some of those persons that were involved in it and do a much more effective and efficient job. So these are kind of the tenets. And again, the overall idea is not, I stress, not in terms of attaining a number, but in terms of gaining efficiency. I refer to it as doctor of economics, but a medical doctor, you may have a little lump somewhere, and you go to the doctor, you say, well, the problem with you is that you're too obese and you need to get fit. And you can chop off a leg and you will immediately be lighter, but the problem is the underlying problem remains. So it's not about chopping and cutting, it's about trying to find, you got to go in and analyze every SOE, see what their functions are, see what the process involved, and see how you could gain efficiency. And that I shall mention some tenets. One we expect, because Barbados has been in a very difficult position for a long, long time. The honest truth is that we cannot come out where we are on scale. There will be an adjustment period, and so you have to approach it the government shows an approach in the very way in which they will ensure a caring approach. So there's some of the tenets. There'll be a household mitigation unit set up in the Prime Minister's office to ensure that the burden and any displaced workers are handled in a very caring and compassionate manner. No 2 persons from the same household or breadwinners, for example. There'll be a focus on retraining and reabsorbing in other parts of the private sector where it's needed. And I was told, and the DFE could speak to that the training fund right now for that is quite healthy, and so there are opportunities for retraining. The government will also use sunset clause and affirmative action to ensure that persons where staff, for example, move off and form a business to provide a service, they're able to get preferential treatment in terms of the procurement of goods and services. Some examples, for example, the differently able persons person under 30 years will be given preferential treatment in provision of certain services. Perhaps could allow for geographical presence. A fellow living in St. Lucie, some workers get together and form some business, will have preferential treatment in geographical provision of service within that area. There's a displaced workers, for example, on the adjustment program that we are designing, that being designed, will have preferential treatment up to 20% for the entire life adjustment program per year. So you're trying to find a way in which not only you say we're going to set up, for example, you can find separation where 3 or 4 workers get together and provide community services, a part of their business to the company, but you got to ensure that they get business. So this is part of that. You also will be able to, part of the movement on separation, perhaps access the government lands, agricultural lands, with greenhouses to start part of your business and get going with that, and access the license. So different packages are being considered. I should stress that the economic team make recommendations. This is not make policy. Policy is made at cabinet. So what I'm outlining to you is not policies, there are recommendations coming out under the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, the BERTS program. We also will be identifying critical transformation activities within the government. For example, we all know, and it's common, we have to digitize the public sector. Everyone here uses their cell phone and all, iPad, and to do almost everything we do. Yet within the public sector, there's a need to digitize the records, to digitize the processes. So there'll be a large digitization project, and the government already approached one of the international development partners, IDB, for financing for that, which should be probably covered 3 years as a part of a broader modernization project. So displaced workers will be fine accessing that, but watch, it doesn't hit your finances because it's being financed from somewhere else. And during that period now, you can use training opportunities because you're transforming the entire public sector to one of fit for purpose. You can use the opportunity to train in many areas in the provision of medical billing and coding, in the provision of medical transcription and legal transcription, and other areas where we can become, as I say, a more high value service economy. So this is the tenets of it. We also align ourselves to opportunity investment within Barbados, outside of Barbados, within CARICON. We know the Ross University is setting it shop from the beginning of January, and that will be employing a host of Barbadians, and there's training to provide services there. Because there's opportunities within Caribbean, within Guyana and other areas in terms of the Capital Works program. There'll be government Capital Works program will also require provision of services. Like, for example, the government is embarking on a project of roofing protection, or primarily referred to as reef the roof, to ensure that our houses, etc., are more stable and structurally sound in terms of protecting ourselves from any possible hurricane. So this is the general overall framework of what we call the RERE project: retool and empower, retrain and enfranchise. So it's more of a clinical approach to making efficiency in public sector. Before I get back, I will pause on the public sector, just talk about, because the question we saw at the beginning was the growth. How are we going to get growth? And we're going to anchor growth on terms of 5 pillars. One, we're going to begin to invest, the government is beginning to invest in high-skilled, knowledge-based economy, where in order to generate value for value added, provide more ways for the domestic savings to be channeled into those areas where we need investment, local investment, and support startup businesses, entrepreneurship, etc. And use all the assets, the faculties of government, non-fiscal levers, to remove all impediments to growth. Things like, if you look at what businesses mention as impediments to growth or cost of doing business, would be getting town country planning approval, for example, the time it takes to clear. And this is not pointing any finger at anyone. This, you go on the international, the OECD website, you look at doing business indicators, you will see these things apply. You want to be able to clear things through the port faster. You want to be able to get approval to start a business faster. You want issuing a license to be more transparent. You want town country planning approval to be much quicker transparent. So these are things, any bureaucratic process or framework that will impede business have to be addressed, and that's part of that. And of course, we want to diverse the economy into new ways and renewable energy, high-tech software development, etc. I would say that, I recall that many years ago, we started to realize the region in terms of solar energy development. But I'm not sure where we are today relative to that, and it hasn't taken off as much as it could have gone. So that's on the growth side. On the financial side, what we're doing, we have done already. One of the problems they have on there in terms of in the past was the continuous financing of the fiscal through the central bank. And so, if you're going to be if you're going to be serious, and they got this program is a serious program about being fiscally prudent and fiscally fit, then you have to ensure that there's no temptation for continuous unbridled support in financing from the central bank. And so the government has already reduced what we call the overdraft facility, we refer to as the Ways and Means, from 10% to 7.5%. That's already been done. And then they've already passed law in Parliament to ensure that the central bank, in terms of purchasing primary securities in the primary market, which is a real financing, there's a cap at that, about 10% of expenditures, which is reasonable and is the right way to go in terms of maintaining central bank autonomy and also minimizing over-financing the government. In terms of what also the program does, is try to protect the financial system, all aspects of it, insurance, banks, and all aspects from the debt restructuring impact. So they're doing stress tests and make sure what they find the agreement on debt restructuring is something that can maintain the health of the financial system. All right, how do we ensure that our program is maintained, that the government sticks to itself? The government has invited the International Monetary Fund as a partner to help with the support of the program. And the International Monetary Fund supports countries in primarily three ways. First, that's why we started by explaining the program. This is Barbados. There's a concept sometimes that the International Monetary Fund comes and give you this and tell you do that. That is so far from the truth. And I know because I'm a staff member. When we go to countries, the country owns the program, they develop the program. Sometimes the fund may get involved in allocating systems on the elements because of the technical expertise or because of the capacity of the country. By the end of the day, the country owns the program. I can tell you for sure, without fear of contradiction, that what I've just presented to you, the BERT program, is 100% Belgian owned, developed by the Barbados team, and will be implemented by Barbados team, owned by Barbados team. What the IMF comes in and do is ensure that it hangs together, and what they do then is endorse it. By endorsing your Barbados, let's call it the BERTS program for short. By endorsing the BERTS program, the IMF then provides what you call a catalytic role, because it has an international reputation by having 186 countries signed on. And when investors see the fund say, well, this is the BERTS program is a doable program, we believe the country is committed to it, then immediately development partners like IDB and CDB would bring in access to funds. Money is coming in on that. Funds comes in, and I can tell you right now we have commitments from IDB, 2% in GDP, which is 200 million signing, that the IMF endorses the Barbados BERT program, and 100 from CDB. So you see, and then private individuals and investors who have brought in capital to do different projects, but with fear that same thing may happen again, or the fiscal doesn't hold together, or there's just wind in the air, nobody really serious. They look and say, well, if the IMF is supporting your program, has endorsed your program, then we've seen in countries, capital comes back, and they come back, and you start to build back. Another way, the second way the IMF provides assistance is that once they endorse the program, and usually because you see they have the problem on the reserves, they provide what we refer to as balance of payment support. So there's some funds come to help to restore your reserves, and that immediately goes to the central bank into reserve to show it up. Again, it offers a measure of confidence, and that's why the International Monetary Fund was set up. We refer to help countries what we call balance of payments difficulties. Excuse me. That's how we measure the reserves on the external side. And the third way is by providing technical support. During the program, the IMF will make available its technical expertise in reviewing whatever the country wants, its tax system, because they have considerable expertise in this, review the expenditure system, offer you ideas of how you can be more efficient in different areas. So technical support. And we're all familiar with that as Barbadians because we have CARTAP, the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistant, who go through the region offering assistance. So 3 ways in which the fund comes in. But let me make it clear, the fund doesn't come and tell you what to do. In fact, I said earlier that we are going to hit 6% primary balance by in the next 18 months, by the end of the fiscal year in 1920. That then becomes a target. The IMF then uses that as what you call a condition. So a criteria, it says, well, you say you're going to meet it, so put that as a target. So the broad underlying parameters of your program, the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation program, becomes the targets which you agree with the International Monetary Fund that we will hit, which is a good thing because you need, I mean, if you're going, and all of us, if you have a problem, you have to do an intervention, you need a partner to help you. Right? If you wanna go to AA, that way you have AAs and all these things. So this gives seriousness to what the Barbados government is doing, what the team is doing. And these, what I mentioned here, some of the criteria which program will be judged upon. Will be held of the Barbados government will be held to the fire in terms of meeting the primary balance, ensuring that the reserves are built back comfortably over a period of time, and that we do not accumulate any further arrears. You must meet and government is committed to doing that in this program, meeting the current on payments and develop a program to clear your past arrears within the 4-year period. These are things that the work program built into it and the government itself sets for itself, and therefore become part of the target. So that's kind of monitoring. The other thing I would say is that the overall oversight and monitoring of this comes under the umbrella of the social partnership. And we all recall the social partnership was set up in 1991 when we first went to the International Monetary Fund to ensure that labor, employers, and government were on the same page as pertaining to the direction the economy were going, and in terms of prices and income, that they were what is needed to keep Barbados on a stable path. And that partnership will be a key in terms of oversight of the program. One last note, the program, because now you have access to IMF financing, will be monitored on a semi-annual basis, which means the team will visit, go to the board, IMF board, every 6 months, and every time once we meet our targets and we're on track, there'll be a further disbursement. All right, so let me go back quickly to the SOEs and talk about that very quickly. So as the Prime Minister indicated earlier, there was an online survey done by, which was completed by at least 5,000 persons. In terms of female-male ratio, quite even. Someone from every parish took part in it. Quite an impressive response rate. And what we did, that laid the basis for what were identified as those SOEs from which we can immediately start to think about and look for savings in terms of efficiency gains. Now, this came out of discussions with the social partnership and the various subgroups and consultation groups who will have examined the individual SOEs in the manner I described earlier and came up with these recommendations. Once again, there are recommendations to give a notion of where we're going. Excuse me. As I said, at the center of the works plan is the modernization of the SOEs and the government sector. The consultative process identified, let's start. There are at least 3, you see the Cave of Barbados, 3 entities which currently engage. And these are, we kind of look at it, what we can do now to get some savings now, and those that require more heavy lifting later. And so you have the Caves of Barbados. My glasses, sorry. The Caves of Barbados.
They're behind you.
All right, so yeah, sorry about that. At least there are some entities where they are providing a service where you could commercialize it, and that could be perhaps provided best by the private sector, and that will reduce these transfers to them. So, for example, the Caves of Barbados is one where the idea is to sell the operation of the caves, but maintain the lease of the land and of the caves. Maintain caves itself and lease that, but sell the operations out. And that connected with probably 8 million there. Kensington Oval, again, can be run in the commercial way through a public-private partnership and transfer it back to the Barbados Cricket Association. Again, that will be reduce. If it's run a commercial way through a private partnership, you could reduce the 2.6 million in cost to barely 1.1 roughly. These are estimates. These are all just estimates, saving about another 1 million there. And the Barbados Conference Services is an immediate one. You have approximately, because the arrival of Ross University, that will immediately comes off the government books and save about 4.4 million. Then there are some three entities which provide a service to the public, which perhaps it can be paid for in terms of user fees. These are the Land Registry, the vital statistics of the Supreme Court, and the Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Rights through a possible the private-public partnership, in which workers also could be offered option to buy shares. So the idea here is cost recovery, and I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to go through them a bit faster. And also the Financial Service Commission, that can become self-sustaining by through the fees it raises for services, but also expanding its operation to the ECCU region in terms of regulation of non-banks. There were on the National NICE initiative and the National Productivity Council. We've had mixed results from those over the years in terms of their impact on in terms of raising productivity, and the idea is that there may be less expensive approach to focusing on competitiveness, and so these will be between them set up, discarded, and set up a unit under the umbrella of the social partnership, a much smaller unit, and then provide the technical work from within the Ministry of Economic Affairs. That will at least save at least 2.5 million there. The defense sports program is already off the consolidated fund. Then there's three here: government information services, the government printing department, the broadcasting unit, which can be merged into a public affairs unit and a public broadcasting unit locally, and keep the NCTV part of it the cable part is quite profitable, and that could be the platform to help support the operations. Retain that part, and then the other services you privatize out, and the savings there could be in region of 3.5 million or so. Gymnasium absorbed back into NC National Sports Council, and similarly NCF, the Culture Industries Development Authority, into NCF, and the constitutional empowerment is already off the government consolidated fund. Those savings together about 32 million. But that's the fiscal year savings and what we can start immediately. There are also a group which will require much more heavy lifting. There's some of these major activities are carried out by the public sector, where in many jurisdictions they can actually be carried out by the private sector much better, and they offer opportunity for us to improve the delivery of our services. And to enfranchise Barbadians, as I point out, one of the tenets of which we are restructuring the SOEs. For example, the transport board, the process can involve helping drivers and their teams to own buses, and also sanitation, own the oil trucks, bid for work from government, and commit to some minimum standard of public service. And we also look at their user fees, move the mobile payment, reduce the accounting needs in transport board, and as I said again, through some sort of individual workers setting up there as private companies to provide service. You can see providing for cleaning, for securities, and things like that. I'm picking up because I'm conscious of time. Within Barbados Water Authority, there's considerable savings to be had. Currently, the true costs are running at is somewhere in 120 million. Government is targeting to reduce that cost, save at least 60 million from that, and that through many efficiency gains there. Then there's there's the BMC and BADMC, these can rationalize within each other and then allow for the core generation of electricity to service, particularly in the BADMC. Then there's three, as I mentioned, UDC, NHC, and RDC, who are basically doing the same thing. So rationalization of these together could save considerable savings in efficiency, and we estimate somewhere in 15 million. It costs roughly 65 million to run these together. So this is just notional. This will take a much longer period between 1819 1920, and I should mention the first instance you see in terms of employment numbers, the maximum there is 670, but by rationalized efficiency, there's nowhere in terms of number that will be displaced, and much less than that. And even on this other slide, where we look at the maximum in terms of heavy lifting, there are about 2,150 some persons employed. At most, 1,000 or so will be affected. And again, I mentioned earlier the overarching program of getting those persons empowering, retooling, empowering, retraining, and franchising. And then there's some that you start immediately in terms of efficiency gains, like where you can, for example, University of West Indies, we negotiate user fees, National Cultural Conservation Commission, efficiency savings there, sanitary service authorities, I mentioned the enfranchisement, letting workers to own trucks, etc., and savings on efficiency. The registration department, equivalent for hospitals, so school meals department run it more efficient, allowing for perhaps SPV in some areas. So we have, I sped it a bit there, but 3 blocks. Those that we're going to work on now that can start immediately with gains, targeting at least 32 million, and then those for the next fiscal year, we start now, but they're more heavy lifting to go, and those where we do efficiency. At the same time, what the government is doing is going through the entire central government, not just the SOEs, to look at areas where we are, because the idea is to make the fiscal and the public sector fit for purpose. There are some posts or categories of jobs where you have to redefine them, or in fact they're not necessary in terms of where you're going. For example, a steno typist. This is something not in the digital age. It's not something you do. So you have to find a way to redefine and reabsorb those other places. And so going through every post, every department, temporary, and looking for efficiency gains. Like I say, it's not hitting a number. We're trying to hit a number because we want to meet our bottom line target reset. But even if there wasn't a target to meet, the idea is to restructure, to make the public sector, entire public sector, fit for purpose, to go where we want to go. We can't go where we are now and be efficient. At that, in this point, I will stop from now, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I ask a quick one?
Yeah.
No.
Sorry, I just want to know if you're going to make that available to us.
Yes, we've already given it.
All right, Abby.
Should I,
Yeah, Abby, come here,
I
Abby.
come across?
Come here.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Clive. Ladies and gentlemen, we have. Ladies and gentlemen, we have presented a lot of numbers this afternoon. Numbers are very important. They have to add up. The inability to add up for the last few years is one of the reasons why we're here. But we also know as a team, the whole team, that people are not numbers, that the most important things in life cannot be counted up, added or subtracted. And so I want to put a little bit of context in our thinking about this program that goes beyond the numbers. So you don't need a team of economists or a single number to tell you that to recover from where we are today, there is no nice tasting medicine. The economic predicament that we are in is unlike any we have seen before in our lifetime. And that's been a result of a profound irresponsibility for too long. And so whilst the program and recommendation that Dr. Greenidge expertly presented a few moments ago is a tough program, It is merely to match the tough situation we are in. We have tried the alternatives. We've tried the wait and see approach. We've tried the muddle through model. We've tried the desperately shuffling the pack of cards approach. We've tried, in the final bit, the final fiction, to print money to pay for our bills. And that's why we are here today in this day of reckoning. Now, we've also, the team, considered some alternatives. We've considered the possibility of trying to dodge the tough choices that we are making and presenting in this program. And there's some who will say that there's some magical way in which we don't need to make these tough choices. And as Dr. Greenidge and Clyde Maskell have said before, the thing is that for anything to work, we need growth. And there is no growth under the shadow of towering deficits and debt. So we have to deal with our deficits and debt. We have, for the last 10 years, spent $12 for every $10 that we have earned. And every Barbadian knows that cannot work. Some have said that we should sack 4,000 workers. It is the team's view that that will create, that may solve one problem, but only by creating many others. You know, the economic variables of inflation and deficit and debt, they're actually just symptoms of broken societies. And if we were to send home 4,000 workers, we would break our society. And we cannot get to the road of success by breaking the society. That is a road to strife. It's not the road to success. And so the Barbadian part of this Barbadian economic and recovery transformation is to share this burden evenly. You remember the Prime Minister's mantra, many hands make light work. What is unique about this program, unique historically and internationally, is that we share this burden evenly. We share the burden almost 50-50 between creditors and borrowers. We share the burden almost 50-50 between taxpayers and workers. We share the burden almost 50-50 between overseas taxpayers and domestic taxpayers. That is a unique formulation. We will, if we are able to execute this recommended program, once more reassert Barbados's position as a standard in social partnership, in the standard of solidarity. But we also know that there is no hiding, there is no avoiding the fact that even if it's 50% of 50%, there are some people who will go home. There are some people, the government, to be fiscally fit, needs to be slimmer. And I want to emphasize that an integral part of the program were those things that Dr. Greenidge mentioned, that we are going to do to invest in those workers who may be displaced. We are establishing a $30 million training budget. $30 million. That is a substantial, significant training budget. We're going to establish an equally large program to digitize all of government, to digitize our medical records, our government records. We'll be able to offer every displaced worker an offer, that's our intention, our hope, of training or of part of this program to digitize government. We also hope to offer every displaced worker the option of some land, some greenhouses, some facilities to consider an alternative career in agriculture. And we are going to offer displaced workers a ring fence, a special part of the $400 million government procurement budget, which they will have the ability to bid for. So we have 4 planks of offering a program that is unprecedented in scale and scope to invest in people and really empower, retool, enfranchise, and retrain. And let me end by saying that we think that this program that Dr. Greenidge has presented and the team is working is actually best measured not in numbers, but in what it says about the Barbados character. It says that we are resolute, that we seek fairness and justice, but we are determined. And one of the other aspects of the Barbados character that I want to end with is that we don't like quick fixes. It's one of the reasons why we are united as a country in not wanting to go down the road of a devaluation or depegging of our exchange rate. We believe that will deliver nothing fundamental. Anything fundamental that we need to do will not be solved by that. And it's also why growth, let me come back and end with that, is such a critical part of this program. We've talked a lot about the numbers and what we need to do, but think of the growth strategy as equal in importance. It is tied up with the other things the government is doing. We want to create a high-skilled, a high-wage, a knowledge-based, a creative-based economy, a fossil-free economy, a renewable energy-focused economy. And that is integrated in this program with the other things you've heard this government is doing. Actual policies, not words. Our first jobs initiative. What we're doing in UE to remove fees and encourage more people to go. The integration of the community college, the polytechnic, and the Earthston Training College. We are also, as you know, trying to digitize government. You've heard us say that now several times. Create a 24/7 government. Really make doing business easy and easier in Barbados. Easier for every citizen, not just doing business, just carrying out your day-to-day life. And we think that will also support growth. We are looking to spur the private sector in terms of creating new special economic zones, tech zones, cultural zones, and of course you remember our plan for the new peninsulas and islands. That's all about creating investment-driven, private sector-driven growth. So this is a growth strategy, a strategy that brings down our deficits, brings down our debt, and paves the platform for opportunity and prosperity. And I would view it as much as about growth as about restructuring. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Perhaps I'd like to jump in at the start. Dennis Johnson, let me identify myself as Starcom Network. How much has external shocks been built into creating this program? Because as we speak, there is the shutting down of Petrotrin in Trinidad and Tobago. We talked about natural disasters to which we're prone. But there are other shocks outside of our control that may impact this program. How much of that is built into the economic program going forward?
If I could respond first and then maybe Kevin. Dennis, it's a very important question. We have thought very seriously about this, perhaps coloured by what happened exactly 12 months ago in this region. Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma. We are building in a climate resiliency into this program. You'll have heard Kevin talk about a roofs to reefs program, about trying to help people repair their roofs ahead of this season as much as possible. We're also in this program building up a buffer. So as Kevin introduced at the beginning, one of our problems has been the collapse of international reserves. We are now down to, we have stabilized reserves, but they reached a level that really put our dollar in some jeopardy. We've stabilized it, and this program is about rebuilding those reserves. But to your point, we can't just rebuild to where they once were. We need to rebuild to a new level of resiliency, a new buffer, which will take into account the ability to withstand a hurricane. We want to have insurance policies to do that. We want to have stronger building to do that, stronger roofs. As you know, and I've heard you say on your program, to make a roof hurricane resilient does not actually cost a lot of money, but people need to prepare. So we can do all of those things, but we also need to have insurance in our reserves to deal with that, and that is a key part of the program. Kevin, do you want to talk a bit about the reserve?
Just to add to what Professor Avner said, we're building back the reserve to a comfortable level with some buffers in it. That's built into the program. But this is why it's so critical to get our debt to a more sustainable position, because as Dominica, others in the region would have indicated by experience, when you get a natural disaster, you need to take on additional debt in order to clean up and restore and rebuild. So you need to have your debt levels at a comfortable, sustainable level, because you know then you need the room to go back. If we are where we are now, 175%, 70% of GDP, and we get a natural disaster, we literally have no space on the fiscal to do any expenditure or on the debt to do any borrowing. So this is why the program builds in a path that gives you stability in a very quick time, and over medium term bring you to 60% of GDP.
Does it also factor in the changing cost of energy? The cost of fuel, oil,
So those
which
would
drives a lot of our transportation
so
costs.
part of the program is on the external side. So in terms of economic programming, we usually look at growth. So we deal with that on the growth in terms of GDP growth, etc. Then on the external side, you look at your import path. You know how much you import. We have high potential to import, and we kind of project decent way, not perfect, what our import path will look like. And going to that will be our projection, and based on international institutions' projection of where oil prices will go over the medium term. So you're building in that, and on the export side, you're building different assumptional shocks. We even try to go down to where we think a cricket match might happen. You know, you don't get these things right. So what's the bottom line? You try to build your reserves so you can anticipate it. It's like your personal financing, right? You know, you used to say put away at least 3 months for liquidity fund for a rainy day, but then sometimes it rains real hard, and you got to go and get extra there. So it's from that context.
Only last evening, Dennis, the governor was talking about how we need to build in for oil price shocks. So I want to ask him to comment on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very important question, and I think the issue really is having those buffers to protect us. So, you know, quite often we talk about having at least 3 months of reserve cover, and that, in a sense, is really just a minimum benchmark for us. We really want to have a much larger buffer of reserves to cover us in the event that there is a shock. And I think the point which Kevin was just making is important, especially as it relates to the fiscal. You need to have that room even in your fiscal as you go forward, because you know you plan a program and you say, well, I'm going to run a deficit of 1%, 2%. If you don't have adequate buffers in there, you will find that you're not able to address those shocks that occur. If the prices of oil go up, you're going to lose. You know that you're going to lose some reserves, and therefore you need to have a sufficiently large buffer that you, even if you lost 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you don't suddenly begin to feel uncomfortable because of the loss of reserves. And I think that is going to be very, very critical for us going forward, to the extent where, you know, a little overshooting may not be a bad thing.
I have a couple of points I'd like you to address. The actual savings areas were rushed through, so I'm glad that you're going to send the slides out so we'll get a better idea. It said that it was a result of the online survey, so I'm not sure whether that's what people told you or what you've decided that you're going to do. I'm assuming it's the latter, based on the results of the survey. However, not to go into every detail, but how soon would there be a detailed action sheet, for example, for each one of those entities that you cannot do only internally, that would call for macro private sector or micro private sector investment, selling a bus off, what kind of program that would be, or buying CBC or some other entity, because that brings up questions about the debt that those entities, some entities may have, that the buyer would not be interested in taking over. For example, previous owings to the government for taxes and VAT and whatever. Is that, I'm not getting into each detail, but I want to know, is there going to be a sheet released to the private sector or to the public about how each one of those, you know, before Christmas, or is that sometime down in the future? And after that, I'd like to know if you have a conundrum in that you are now reaping benefits. I read in the paper today that you're going to get wonderful roads because of the taxes you're collecting now for the fuel tax. But at the same time, California has now mandated some of the most far-reaching environmental standards moving towards renewable energy. Renewable energy saves you importing the fuel. But you have a conundrum because you're making money off the thing that you would like to stop importing. And therefore, on the one hand, you don't want to lose the fuel tax revenue. On the other hand, you want to stop having to spend that foreign exchange. Do you have a problem where your hands are tied in terms of initiatives to really push Barbados towards renewable energy?
So, Patrick, you've asked two important questions. They're different. Let me take the first one first and then ask Kevin or Clyde or anyone on the team to join in. But the issue of timing is an integral part of the program. So as Kevin mentioned in his presentation, we have divided up what we're doing between those things that we can do fairly quickly and those things that will take time. Well, of course, this plan needs to be approved by the cabinet, and if it were to be approved, there are those set of savings that will only come through working through with those entities, and that's why we've broken it up between the first 6 months and then the next 12 months. So where we're having to, for example, develop a new model of how we might lend money to make it able for buses, for bus drivers to buy buses, and then to have a regulatory system in which they are operating their buses. We know that cannot be done the next month, the next 3 months, and we're not counting any gains for that until the next 12 months from here. On the question on the petrol tax and renewable energy and our ability to fund the roads, when we put on the petrol tax, we were very conscious of what you were just saying. That we knew that this will probably not be a tax that will be in place in 20 years' time because we are moving to more electrical cars, fossil free, and we want to do that. We don't think that's going to happen in any material way over the next 5 years. So we are thinking about it and looking at what the evolution of that tax would be, and we expect this not to constrain ourselves and constrain our expenditures. I don't know if other members wish to add.
Let me just on the last one. If in terms of the fuel tax, you move and you encourage more alternative, safer energy, then you're also going to save on the import bill. So your net effect is going to be positive. So you have more fiscal space, so to speak, to do your investment. So going in that direction will save you tremendously on the back end, particularly since the direction of the fuel prices is upward. So it would be ideal for the government to consider losing on the fuel tax if it's going to save on the import bill of fuel, and you save tremendously in that
You're
direction.
saying go for 5 years, saying go now.
No, I'm not saying go, I'm saying the direction. So, you remember in this
We're
works
saying
program,
we're not worried about the
we're not worried
revenues
about
in
that,
the
but
next
also
5
keep
years.
in mind how we design the program. It's a recovery and transformation program. So part of the process is first to recover, stabilize the economy, because it's been in a very bad position first. And then this transformation part, we envision will be changing the character and nature of the economy from overly oil dependent and fuel dependent to more and more dependent on clean fuel, etc. But you gotta pick your battles, so to speak. Now, what you need to do now, stabilize the economy. What you need to do now, fix the fiscal, make the public sector fit for purpose. And then you can focus more on the transformation element. I didn't go into it there, but there's some elements what you call structural reforms, where you look at ways to shift the direction of the economy. So, for example, one has to start thinking about linkages between tourism and the other sectors. Those sort of things you have to think about removing, making it easier to set up business, and making Barbados a place where people want to return often. So, there's a transformation element and there's a recovery element. So it's not a magic 5 years or so, but you could imagine if you can immediately save on your import bill, then you can ease on the other side.
So a quick follow-up for that, if you don't mind. The important thing that has not been addressed, because because I've not only addressed the transport board drivers, is if you want to sell an entity, whether lease to for the cave or for Comey or some merge of all the sports facilities in Barbados and that private sector take over that, some stadium company, if you want to sell the television station off or try. The point is that there's no point charging them $200 million for something and then they got to pay you back $150 million in VAT. So that's why I'm asking if there's going to be RFPs or whatever you call them, saying we are prepared, this thing is valued at $100 million, we're prepared to forgive this VAT and that income tax or whatever, it hasn't been paid, PAYE, and you pay us $20 million, you can have it. I wonder if you're going to be publishing any of that, or if that isn't going to be even privately published within, well, I understand it's not been for over a year now. So that means that there's going to be no action on private sector getting involved in a tangible way in helping you out of your jam for over a year.
Well,
You put that to the second
let's
tier.
begin by saying that we commit to the highest levels of transparency. So if we're going to go through a process of divestment or however structured, enfranchisement or divestment, this will be published. This will be public tenders. And there will be, and there will need to be thinking through on how a particular entity is done. And we will need to work with the market and the private sector on that. It may be that some entities need to be restructured before that happens, and other entities don't.
Professor Barry Allen from the Nation. During the presentation, the word dislocation was used on quite a few occasions, but we didn't get anything concrete. Are you in a position to elaborate on what, or even approximate what level of dislocation this program will actually bring when it comes to the pay? You can either give it for the first 6 months, as you said, or you can even stretch it into the 18th month, which will be the next club.
I think that as Kevin said, we're not targeting numbers of people. We're targeting savings. If we can achieve savings without there being an impact on employment, we will do that. We are approaching restructuring in 3 different ways. One is cost recovery. And we believe there are significant savings to be had through cost recovery in which people will not be dislocated. The second one is enfranchisement. So someone is still doing the same job, but they're doing it working for themselves rather than working for government. So again, the employment aspect of that will be limited. But thirdly, there will be efficiency gains, which may well, I mean, we're not going to hide and pretend that if you are making the kind of change we're going to make, where debt to GDP falls from 170% or thereabouts to 60%, this is a tough strategy. There's no pretending it's not. And that's why we have in place one of the most elaborate mitigation strategies you would have ever come across. A $30 million training budget, a massive digitization project. But we are not targeting numbers. There's no sort of desire to achieve X numbers. It's about making the government fiscally fit and trying to do the least impact in to achieve that. Kevin, would you want to add anything, or Clyde, or?
I think it's not.
He's looking for a number of people
But if
laid off.
Well, I don't think you guys have a concrete number. You can
No,
tell
no.
me,
But if you look at
there
this
should be
screen,
some level of
if you look at what at the
approximation.
presentation, you see all those that we identified for the first 6 months, which we need to get going in terms of efficiency, cost recovery, etc. That Professor Amdas indicated, the maximum employment in those you see 670 at the bottom, but you can see that these will exist, most of these in some form or the other. So one will say 670, certainly no really number that be affected, much less than that. And even where they're taken off government and they're privatized, that provide employment opportunity for those that were in that sector. So as Avi pointed out, it's difficult to target a number, and I think we need to, the way to look at it is, we need to get it in shape, the public sector, the SOEs. And what we are targeting is efficiency. There will be some displaced, and then we put together a framework to accommodate that. But the number, if you had to take the opposite end of the spectrum, the maximum you see there is 670. But again, common sense, they exist in some form. You see, for example, Comey going back to the BCA, it's going to exist. The caves operations are are sell off, who's going to run that? The same people, right? So the way to look at it, and I want to pick up just one point you said, Patrick, was to solve the problem. It is our problem. Huh? It's all Barbados' problem. It's not. I want us to think it's not our problem. Certainly not. It is my problem. It's Avi's problem. It's governor problem. It's professor problem. It's all our problem we try to solve. And where we're trying to go is get this public sector fit for purpose. I want us to keep that in mind and keep in the context that the structure we have built over the years, we have moved a lot off a central government, and we have built out more to the peripherals, into the public enterprises. It's an unusual structure you find. It doesn't exist in many countries. And if you look at our wage bill in central government really haven't moved. In fact, it has shrunk over a period. But if you add in the wage bill for the SOEs, it's really ballooned. So we have a unique structure, but that didn't occur in 1 year or 2 years. It took time, right? And so it's going to take time to make it back fit and make it in a way that will be effective and efficient to deliver what we are delivering.
I have to say I'm surprised that you're moving so slowly on the private sector involvement, because that will bring you hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least get these debts off, a lot of those debts, and you seem to be pushing that away for another year or two.
But for the very reason that you yourself mentioned, that you cannot do that overnight. It needs to be thought through. Every entity, you need to work out, do you sell that with the debt, without the debt? How do you
But it doesn't mean that we're waiting a year to start. You're starting now, but that's a heavy fellas. Those fellas, there's some that if you take, for example, UDC and NC, they may be quicker to merge than if you deal with a transport board or water authorities. It's a huge structure. It's not that we're going to wait a year. You start now, and you start to plan, and you go in and assess the processes, and you do. But the gains from that you probably won't see now.
In fact, that's the point.
Later.
It's not wait.
It's not waiting.
It is working now, but
Everything is on the table
not
now.
banking gains today, because we know to do it properly,
Takes time.
exactly as you said, it takes time. So we are expecting gains to take place in 12 months' time, but we're working on it now.
So you're not waiting.
Follow-up question is, if and when this program is endorsed by the fund, can you give us a time frame or even any details regarding what kind of funding you would want to access from them going forward?
So that question points directly at me.
Kevin,
So,
Kevin, I think you should leave that question.
There's some parts I can address. There's some parts. The fund team have arrived in Barbados to continue the discussion, negotiation with the government in terms of endorsing the program. And you've heard the Prime Minister say so before, that the aim is to go to the board, the IMF board, sometime in September. There are many factors that go into the amount of access a country have. And before that discussion is reached a conclusion, it's no way we will know. But it has to to do with the need of the country on the external side. So as we mentioned before, as Avinash pointed out, the need to rebuild your reserves to a comfortable level, but also fit into that will be your projections on how you expect the fiscal to go. So on the fiscal, because we're going to need an immediate need and we're trying to target, that will come factor into it. So there are a lot of elements going into that, right? The strength, how we are making a really strong effort. The government is on the economic program that will have an impact on it, but the amount of access depends on those factors. But let me refocus your question a bit. That's not the critical part. Truthfully, the critical part of the fund support comes in the endorsement. Because when you get the endorsement in IMF on your program, it plays an enormous catalytic role. They're financing waiting. And many countries sometimes ask for a fund program without fund financing because they don't want the fund financing. They want the endorsement that your program, your macro and fiscal framework is coherent and hands together. So we know we have IDB and CDB and other development partners waiting to come in, because it's like you are going to do something, you need someone to say, look, I got your back, this is a good thing you're doing, it's a good program, and I'm going to help you hold your feet to the fire in terms of the programs you set. That's, in many countries, and in the case of Barbados, is also much more critical. The catalytic role, let me focus on that, not how much you're going to get, because extra dollar here or there really is in the short term. And that will help us then to rebuild our economy. Investors are coming, help us to get the growth that we need going, and help us to regain our access to markets Because you don't want to be dependent on that funding. You want to be dependent to go to the market at cheap rates and build your economy.
So,
So
Barry,
that's the focus.
the long and short of it is that we will negotiate what we call the quota, and that will come a little later. But the other thing is this, that when you rebuild your reserves, it means that you instill confidence, international confidence, and eventually, after some years, you can go back to the international market. Over the last decade, interest rates in the world have been at their lowest historically, and Barbados was borrowing at 10 and 12%. Now, when we should have been exploiting low interest rates, or economic circumstances denied us the opportunity to borrow money. So the whole thing here is the restoration of your reserves, the restoration of your fiscal position in your debt, and ultimately to have growth. That's why it is going to be so crucial for the private sector to come in to inspire the growth that we need in order to bring us to a point of stability. Now, what Patrick was talking about in terms of the private sector getting involved at this stage is more to do with our capacity now to go and see what CBC is really like, what the transport board is really like, and the things that we can ultimately do. But we know what we want to do, but it cannot happen in 6 months. But we are in the process of doing that, but the benefits will be derived. But definitely, Patrick, we need to have the private sector involved in this, because ultimately the only way out is growth.
And Professor, my final question for you is that in the interim, there are some Barbadians, crypto investors, some other persons awaiting tax refunds. In the interim of the implementation of this program, what can you say to those Barbadians that are expecting the government of the day to fulfill its obligation to them?
That's a necessary condition as part of the program. We have to repay the arrears, and those arrears will be repaid over the length of the program. So Barbadians can look forward to receiving what we owe them.
Kevin, do you want to add?
I was just to endorse, not only are we going to be, well, not only this program built in terms of, I told you it was stock arrears of 1.9 billion, which include tax refunds, arrears to suppliers, etc. That has to be repaid over the life of the program. We envision this program as a 4-year program that will set us on the track of transformation. But we also, the program envisions that the government remain current in all repayments. So you're not going
to
to...
recognize, Dr. Green, is that for most Barbadians, they expect that to be a short-term fix.
Which one? The current?
All payments, they expect it to be a short-term.
It means that you will go back where you were?
No, that they would receive what is due to them.
No, so you can appreciate that 1.9 billion is not 10 cents or 1.2 cents. Yeah. So you can't pay that tomorrow. You have to develop a plan to pay over a period that is consistent with the envelope of resources you will have at that point in time. And that is built into this already.
But Doc, isn't the fact that you may have mergers, you may have entities being merged, some people will be displaced, and the NIS, for example, will find itself under some pressure as well. Because there are some state entities that are not current with their NIS payments.
Yeah. Those are planned.
That's
for.
also
That-
that's
yeah,
also
that's
the
taken-
plan. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
that's
also part of
that's
it.
taken.
One thing you should mention though is that this program also builds in terms of monitoring, it builds in what we call a social spending protection element.
Right.
So because sometimes you find when governments get under pressure, they tend to cut
Social spending.
and also if you implement a program, as Avi said, you won't come out on scale. There may be some displacement. So you see one of the benchmarks I mentioned, they one of the targets in terms of us reporting regularly to IMF and to ourselves, because we are really in charge of our own destiny, is to put a limit to how much you can reduce social spending by. So you want to protect the social spending so that the vulnerable and the poor segments of society are taken care of.
Can I just ask Ian to say a few words on the NIS? Because the viability and success of the fund is a very important aspect.
I'm going to make a very simple point. It makes no sense being on the right track if you stay put. The train will run you over. We as a team have sat and we have looked at what is necessary to bring us out of this situation. we're tackling four very critical problems at the same time. But we're tackling them not from the point of view of taking a cutlass, but taking a scaffold to seek to adjust and restructure our economy in such a way that we don't have a short-term fix that gives us back something today, but 4 or 5 years down the road, we are on that cycle, that treadmill where we go through one restructuring after another restructuring after another restructuring. We have looked at, we have learned the lessons of the Jamaican exercise, and we have no intention of going there. This program, therefore, is one that looks to fix the fundamental problem that we face, and the fundamental problem that we face is a problem in which our economy is not fit for purpose, our government is not fit for purpose, and our structures are not 21st century structures. So we could go the route that has been suggested, take the acts as you would like, cut off 4,000 people and say, we have fixed it. But that's essentially chopping off a leg off a overweight person and say that you have fixed it. They still got the diabetes, they still got the hypertension. You have to fix the fundamental underlying problem. And that is what we are doing, fixing the fundamental underlying problem. And we have sought to do that in a very phased and structured manner. Phased manner dealing with what we can accomplish within the first 6 months, what we can accomplish within the next 12 months, but we are not waiting to tackle the issues that needs to be addressed in 12 months' time by starting in 12 months' time. We are starting with those now. It is not going to be a painless exercise. So if we want to go to this and expect that there will be no pain, we will be fooling ourselves. And the reason we are here today is essentially to say to Barbados in a very candid and frank manner, this is the situation that we find ourselves in. We have done the diagnosis. These are the things that we need to do to fix it. And this is the time period over which we intend to fix it. We are advisors. We make recommendations. Those recommendations now need to be agreed upon, and those need now to be agreed upon by the Cabinet of Barbados. We expect, given the long hours, the intense discussion, the robust arguments that we've had, that the plan can stand the test of time and the scrutiny of public inquiry, but more so the inquiry of those professionals out there who, like all Barbadians, like to quarterback on a Monday morning and tell you what is the perfect solution. Well, there is really no perfect solution in life. What we have done is to look at it and to assess it and to make our best judgment. But the most critical, important thing you have not asked about, and the most critical and important thing is going to be the implementation over the next 4 years. And that is going to require all of us, not this economic team, but all of us to roll up our sleeves and dig deep and work very hard if we expect to go to this. Otherwise, we are going to be in this for at least another generation. I ain't got no children, so when I drop dead, it's done. But there are persons out there, like my friend Kevin, you got 2 sons, right?
Yeah.
How many you got?
Well, you got to put it on the spot.
Or daughters?
You got to put it on the spot.
But we need to address this now, otherwise we are putting in jeopardy the future of all Barbadians, but more importantly, the future of the youth, and the future of the aged. You all know I come from Social Security. I have spoke to these issues on more than one occasion because I saw what was happening. I understand the health of Social Security is highly correlated with the health of the macroeconomy. So then a quick fix. All of us have essentially to roll up our sleeves, carry the weight that needs to be carried, and understand that the road ahead is going to be tough, but if we remain focused, determined, and resolute that we will get to where we intend to get to. Otherwise, we really spending thought in mud. And I don't spend thought in mud. I don't play many games.
I just wanted to
Governor?
Yes.
finalize on one point, is no recommendation either over education or health, cutbacks or mergers or.
No, we
haven't
are
touched those.
not cutting back on education or health. Actually, what we are looking in terms of health is essentially trying to get health on a financial footing that it can
On the
stand.
revenue side.
Because let me be frank, the Barbadian population is an Asian population, and the real elephant in the room is addressing the demographics that we have in terms of that Asian population and providing for them. While they are not going to be productive members of society in terms of going out to work, they still have needs. And their needs are going to be particularly acute as they get closer and closer to the departure lounge. And we know that we have to take care of our elderly because those are the persons who build this society.
Yeah, I just want to go back to on the question of arrears because the fundamentals remain the same whether you're in or outside of a program, and that is your ability to service our expenditures is dependent on the availability of financing. That is why you will see in the program that a key element of the program actually is for us to have fiscal surpluses, which will be complemented by the drawings that we get from, let's say, the IDB and the CDB. And that is what is going to help to finance the reduction in arrears. But clearly, you cannot reduce the arrears faster than you have available financing, and that is a critical element. The reason why we built the arrears in the past because there was inadequate financing, and now we have to make sure that the overall fiscal is strong enough at all times to be able to cover. But as Dr. Greenidge mentioned, a critical element of the program is that those arrears have to be eliminated during the course of the program and that there will be no further buildup of arrears. And that's why we have to manage our expenditures generally very carefully and also look at the whole quality of our tax administration to make sure that we're able to generate the revenues that are necessary to finance the expenditures in the program.
And to add to what the governor just said, last Tuesday I called all of the accounting officers, both in terms of central government and statutory corporations, to a meeting to make sure that they will be reporting on their financial situation, particularly the receivables and the payables, on a real-time basis, but at least that we shall have that information by the 5th day of the following month, to allow us to determine if having made resources available to eliminate arrears going forward, that persons weren't building arrears unknown to the ministry, because that is what happened in the past, and we don't intend to repeat that error going forward. So they have to report. They have to report by the 5th of the following month, and they're going to report not only the usual balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow, but the receivables and the payables, because this is not a situation that we can take chances and have surprises by persons going off and making obligations and commitments that the ministry is unaware of.
Yeah, I think I can get an honest answer out of you because this might sound political, but it's definitely not. A lot of what you're saying and what everyone has been saying here and Ms. Martin and so on about efficiency and management and people accounting and accountability, I thought that Barbados used to be like that. Was it like that at one point, or has it always been the free for all that seems to be described over the last
You seem to be asking me a political question.
Well, it's not political. Ask you from your experience.
But I will say to you that I have been in the public service now. This is 38 years, and the only time I have seen the level of fiscal and discipline exercise is over the last 8 or so years, and in particularly last 5 years. There was a time in Barbados where no government institution, whether it be a state enterprise or central government, could have gone off and created the obligation for government without the express approval of the Ministry of Finance. that fell down. And that's why I called that meeting, because we are not going to be having that situation going forward.
Well, um, I would like to thank the economic team.
I have
Um,
one question, sorry.
yeah.
Before we go. We mentioned the IDB and the CDB already giving their indication that they would assist. Can you say what you've been hearing from the IMF so far, or if you're hopeful or confident about getting the stamp approval when we go?
And that's why we've worked so hard over the last couple of months. So, if we did not have that hope, this work would be in vain. So, of course, we do. I would like to thank the economic team for making Barbadians more aware of the circumstances confronting the country. In fact, prior to coming to government, we had some idea of the difficulties, but it must be said that we did not anticipate the level of arrears that we have seen and the level of inefficiency that we have seen across institutions of government since coming to government. And it may appear to be a difficult journey that we're on, and it is, because I think we have outlined the circumstances. But I also think that the effort of leadership that has been made and the attempt at management across the public sector so far inspires not only me, but I think the entire team, because I do think that we understand that we are at a particular juncture. We're at a period when, if we don't take control of the circumstances that have confronted us, then the future that we want will not be a sustainable future. But the efforts have been made. In terms of workload, I can tell you that I have never seen, and I don't think there's anyone here who has ever seen this kind of work. And some of the public servants can testify to that. The long hours that we've been engaging in, the kind of consultation that we have had across the board with the social partnership. And it all has to do, and I'll end on this, with leadership. You cannot see circumstances confronting you and ignore them. And what we had in the last couple of years in Barbados has been a failure to recognize that we were not on the correct path. But while it is a challenge, it also presents us with great opportunity to make a real difference to the future generation of Barbadians. And in that light, I think that all of us who have so far been part of this process would recognize that although we have been asked to deliver in terms of time and effort and intellect and whatever, that we're doing it for a very just cause. Because moments like these only come once. And this is the time for us to provide the leadership, but then also to ask Barbadians to be engaged in this process. Engage in the process of adjustment that is confronting us. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So long,